You ever receive a gift and the first thought is, this will blow up in my face? I know that look. I have seen it 1,000 times. I have lived it too. There is a group of people who carry a thesis like an identity. They believe they were born under a bad star. They see disaster even in miracles. This is not fluff or feel-good cheerleading. I will cut open the operating system of that mind. I will show the wiring that turns blessings into proof of doom. You will watch how a simple interpretation becomes a life sentence. You will learn where the switch hides, and you will learn how to press it slowly, without violence. If you are listening because you suspect you do this, admit it now. Naming the pattern is the first clean cut. Next, I will map the type of person who lives inside this story. You will hear the raw scan. Then I will show the variations that disguise themselves as reason. Stay with me. The map explains everything that comes after. That early scene, the breath that tightens when something good happens, is deceptively small. It reads like modest caution. But in my work, I learned to read that breath as a symptom. It tells a larger story about identity, expectation, and a mind trained to find threat where there is promise. When I say people who think they were born unlucky, I am not talking about superstition alone. I am naming a layered psychology. On the surface, they have a certain rhetoric. Underneath, they carry an economy of meanings that runs their choices. I want to describe that economy now. On the outside, they look like critics of excess. They have neat phrases about fairness, karma, and integrity. They will say things like, I don't want to sell my soul for money, or I trust the universe, not quick luck. These sound noble. They sound morally ordered. The language protects them from shame. It gives them a badge. But that badge has a hidden function. It excuses an action. It justifies self-limitation. It rewrites defeat as moral superiority. Behind closed doors, their private script is different. They carry a quiet ledger of all the times life betrayed them. They catalog small injustices like forensic evidence. Each entry is proof. They rehearse their story to sleep. When money arrives, their first move is to look for the trap. When a partner appears, their first thought is the exit. When an opportunity shines, their instinct is to dampen it. This private narrative is not neutral. It is a governing myth. The myth shows up in rituals, not mystical ones, mundane habits. The person who believes themselves cursed will delay, check, over-prepare, or refuse. They will ask for guarantees no one can give. They will ask for proof of loyalty before they trust. They will underprice their work as if protection comes from being small. Each ritual reduces exposure and, by design, reduces gain. The ritual models a life that never risks the reward. It keeps the person safe from disappointment and also safe from abundance. A pattern like this feeds two contradictory public messages. 1. I want prosperity. 2. I won't do what it takes to risk it. The contradiction is not accidental. It is the structure of identity. The identity needs the drama of being wronged. The drama preserves a type of meaning. It tells the person who they are. Sacrificing the drama feels like amputating a limb, so they cling to it. They punish themselves for wanting more while saying they want it. Let me be sharper. This group tends to play two roles simultaneously. To others, they often present as self-aware moralists. To themselves, they are perpetual interpreters of threat. They can diagnose injustice in the world with ease. They can point to systemic corruption, to nepotism, to luck that favors other people. They are right about many things. But their internal currency buys one thing above all: confirmation. And confirmation is what they spend their life obtaining. When money appears, the drama accelerates. An extra check means paperwork. A raise triggers scenarios of overload. A windfall signals family fights. I have watched this pattern in the smallest scales. Someone wins a small prize and emails me an anxiety-filled list of ways it can go wrong. They already see the worst possible sequel. The mind is trained not to live the moment, but to script its downfall. This rewiring has practical consequences. I will lay out the typical behaviors you will see again and again. First, there is avoidance. The person refuses invitations that might change their socioeconomic status, because change equals vulnerability. Second, there is underapplication. They do not apply for roles they are qualified for. Third, there is early sabotage in relationships. They push away before they can be hurt. These are not random failures. They are calibrated defenses. Every defense has a cost. Avoidance becomes stagnation. Underapplication becomes chronic underearning. Early sabotage becomes solitude. The mind protects a fragile narrative of being wronged at the cost of livable abundance. And the cost compounds. The more the pattern repeats, the louder the proof in their mind grows. See, I'm always unlucky. The brain loves a loop. It prefers a story that fits, even if the story is destructive. In my years of listening and observing, I learned to hear three voices inside this tribe. One voice says, I am the moral exception. It scorns others for selling out. Another voice says, the world is prepped against me. It translates neutral events into hostile signals. The last voice says, if I control the fall, I avoid humiliation. It actively undermines opportunity. The three voices harmonize into a single operant script. It is efficient. It is cruel. It is relentless. Now, don't make the mistake of thinking this is purely cognitive. There is a body to the pattern. It lives in appetite, sleep, finances, and intimacy. People in this group often sleep poorly when things go well. Their bodies expect collapse, and somatic alarm follows. They report stomach knots when they receive praise. Their autonomic system has learned to anticipate punishment. If a mind expects ruin, the body will prepare for it. The preparation then becomes proof. There is also social choreography. They surround themselves with witnesses who confirm the script. Skeptical friends, family skeptics, or communities that valorize martyrdom become like mirrors that never lie. The person does not always pick these witnesses consciously. The mind finds them. The mind chooses those who validate. If someone is already committed to being unlucky, the world politely obliges. People who act like victims get treated like victims. The environment and the mind then trap each other. I said I would be clinical and compassionate at once. Here is where compassion matters. Many people in this condition are not being stubborn to spite themselves. They are conserving a form of psychic survival learned in childhood or trauma. The belief that the universe is against you is often the same response to repeated early betrayals. It is an adaptive rhythm made maladaptive with time. My role is to show that adaptation for what it is, and then explain the cost. No cruelty, only facts. You might be listening and thinking, that is me, or I know someone like that. If so, pause and name one instance where you interpreted good news as a harbinger of bad news. Say it aloud. If you can, I expect the good to rot. That phrase is heavy. It reveals the filter. Naming the filter is not defeat. It is observation. Observation is the first step toward changing the program. Before we go deeper into the mechanics, I want to pause and make a small request. I'm building this channel carefully, episode by episode. If this analysis is landing for you, please subscribe and leave your city or country in the comments. It helps us reach the first 1,000 people who need to hear this. Thank you for staying. Back to the diagnosis. The dissonance between what they claim and what they do is the most instructive part. Publicly, they want prosperity. Privately, they will argue that chasing it makes one base or hollow. Many will dress scarcity as virtue. They will say, real wealth changes people in ugly ways, as if the only alternative to greed is starvation. That is a false binary, yet it serves a function. It allows resistance to growth while preserving moral identity. Growth becomes suspect and therefore avoidable. There is also a special relationship with the idea of the universe. They use the word as a shield. The universe will balance it, becomes a passive liturgy that absolves them from making decisions. It frames patience as spirituality. But behind the phrase is fear of agency. Claiming to wait for the universe is an elegant way to avoid taking risks that require competence, discipline, or assertiveness. She was brilliant and cautious. She received a scholarship to study abroad. Her first response was wonder, then a cascade of worries. She imagined bureaucratic nightmares, illness, the scholarship being revoked, family arguments. She spent the next 6 months preparing for disaster. She refused the celebration. When she arrived, she declined opportunities to collaborate on projects that might have led to network growth. A year later, she returned home with an impeccable transcript, no relationships, and a gnawing certainty that it had all been a setup for loss. The scholarship had been a rare gift. She had been too busy defending to receive it. If you recognized him in a friend, you might also know someone like D. He received an unexpected inheritance. His first movement was to think of legal problems, distant relatives, and how money ruins people. He spent months suspiciously watching every person enter his life as a potential parasite. He refused advisors until he made poor financial choices alone. In 2 years, his capital had dwindled. He used the losses as evidence. Told you so. Money in my hands is trouble. The narrative had closed once again. You can see how the pattern self-validates. The very actions taken to protect a fragile sense of self create the outcomes the fragile self expects. That is the cruel genius of the system. Its logic is airtight from inside. It is only from the outside that the irony reveals itself. That is why external feedback rarely helps. Complimenting a person trapped in this pattern will often be met with suspicion, not gratitude. The compliment threatens the narrative. It forces a response, and so the person defaults to defense. So where does this leave us? It leaves us with a type portrait. People who present as principled, who interpret events through a lens of threat, who prefer the moral drama of being wrong to the messy responsibility of being prosperous. They are not lazy or stupid. They are economizing meaning. They are making sense of their past trauma with a conserved script. The question now is not to shame them, but to explain the variations of this script, because the pattern does not show up the same way in everyone. Next, I will peel that apart. I will show you the common subtypes inside this tribe. Each one is a different way of being unlucky by habit. You will see daily scenes for each type, the belief that runs it, and the life it produces. You may find yourself in one or more. Identifying your subtype is the map toward changing it. Listen closely. The distinctions matter. There is not a single face to this psychology. It splits into styles. Each style dresses the same fear differently. I want to show 4 of the most common shapes I encounter. Listen as I sketch each one like a portrait. You will hear a day in their life, the story that orders them, and the consequences that follow. You may recognize yourself, or someone you love, in more than one. One of these styles I call the prophet of doom. This person reacts to good events as if they are the prelude to catastrophe. When something pleasant appears, their immediate response is prediction. This can't last. They are alert to an ending before the beginning has even settled. A day for the prophet of doom looks like this. They receive a promotion and spend the day imagining the workload, the enemies, the betrayal that will logically follow. They rehearse how to survive the eventual collapse. They avoid celebrations. They keep a running commentary in their head about how the universe balances pleasure with equal pain. Their story is cyclical. Everything good is an omen. The belief that orders them is simple and rigid. Life operates in cruel cycles where joy is always taxed by a larger, corrective failure. Because they expect collapse, they prepare for it, and, ironically, make themselves brittle. The consequence is a life of muted victories. They are constantly drained by imagined future storms. If you are the prophet of doom, you may say to yourself, "I prefer to be realistic." That phrase often masks a deeper fear of responsibility. If this voice sounds familiar, know one thing. Predicting disaster does not protect you from it. It only steals the energy needed to build defenses that work. A second shape is the evidence collector. This person archives every hurt like proof in a trial they are always winning. Their mental life is a ledger. 10 successes can exist in their story, but one failure will occupy center stage. They wake up cataloging injustices. A day in their life is methodical. They list the small betrayals from yesterday. They remember a boss's tone from 5 years ago. They bring these files into every new decision. Their core narrative is that the universe is not just indifferent, but actively collusive against them. Because they collect evidence, they never have to change. They always have reasons to be right. The cost is bitterness and paralysis. Opportunities are filtered through the archive. A potential partner is weighed against a dossier of past slights. A business proposition is compared to 10 old disappointments. The evidence collector becomes a walking negative review of life, and that posture repels the very abundance they claim to want. If you see yourself here, try to notice the ratio between wins and losses in your memory. If losses dominate your attention, you are curating the proof you need to stay small. Then there is the negative comparator. This person lives by comparison. They measure every gift against what others have and find themselves under-rewarded. When they get promoted, they do not feel grateful. They think of someone who got promoted faster or got more. Their inner voice says, "This is not fair." The day of a negative comparator is filled with scrolling and metrics. They watch colleagues' successes like evidence of injustice. Instead of using other people's wins as information, they use them as accusation. The core belief is that life distributes luck unfairly, and they are on the losing side. That belief drives resentment. Resentment drives inaction or passive-aggressive moves that eat away trust. Money becomes a scoreboard rather than a resource. Relationships become contests of who is more cheated. If you fit this stamp, ask yourself how often you translate other people's success into your own failure. Comparison is a toxin. It corrodes gratitude and blocks practical learning. The fourth and perhaps most paradoxical form is the preventive saboteur. This person actively destroys opportunities, often before anyone else can. At first, that seems self-defeating in the obvious way, but within their logic it is protective. By sabotaging early, they avoid the risk of a bigger, more humiliating collapse later. A preventive saboteur receives an invitation to audition and declines, citing too much uncertainty. They are offered a chance to lead, and they undercut the team to make the job unbearable. Their mantra is, "If I break it first, I control the fall." A day for them is full of small acts of preemption. The belief behind this behavior is that fear of future hurt justifies current sabotage. The consequence is tragic. They create the exact failure they feared, but on their terms. They avoid surprise by manufacturing defeat. Intimacy dies slowly. Careers stagnate. The saboteur often feels a perverse relief after self-sabotage because it confirms the identity. See, I was right to expect ruin. If you recognize this pattern, notice how control and self-protection masquerade as prudence. They are not the same. Each subtype is coherent inside itself. Each one rationalizes the same core fear that prosperity will lead to exposure, betrayal, or collapse, but they enact it differently. The religious tone of self-sacrifice, the forensic inventory of past injuries, the comparative lens of fairness, and the micromanager of ruin are all strategies to manage dread. They are different weapons with the same aim. Keep the vulnerable self safe. But weapons become cages. They protect at the cost of living. There is overlap, of course. People migrate. The collector can become a saboteur after a particularly painful loss. The comparator can turn into a prophet when enough comparisons sour into fear. These patterns are not fixed personality traits. They are survival habits. Habits that can be met, understood, and reprogrammed. The first job is identification. Naming your strategy strips it of some of its power. When you can say, "I am the evidence collector," a small distance appears between you and the habit. That distance opens a choice. I want to offer concrete images for each subtype to make them impossible to ignore. Picture the prophet of doom at a small celebration. Everyone toasts. The prophet watches the cake and thinks about the moment the cake will fall. Their hands are already brave. None are fast or painless. All are possible. I want to tell you two short stories now that illustrate repair. One is about a man I will call L. L had been an evidence collector his whole life. He kept a folder of grievances and used them as reasons to avoid larger projects. When he finally agreed to try a new business, he set a rule. For every negative item he added to his internal ledger, he had to write 2 neutral or positive observations. He called it the 2:1 ledger. It seemed trivial, almost silly, but it rewired attention. Over a year, his complaints lost their monopolistic power. He began to see patterns of growth, not just failing. The business did not become a miracle overnight, but L's decisions improved because his internal data set changed. He stopped using history as an immovable verdict and started using it as information. The second story is about a woman I will call S. S fit the preventive saboteur type. She had a ritual of decline. She feared commitment, so she made small clarifying moves that poisoned relationships before they matured. She started a tiny experiment. Accept one invitation every 2 weeks that would have once been declined. Nothing grand, a coffee, a short volunteer shift. She noticed 2 things. First, many of the risks were small and harmless. Second, when she allowed the risk, pleasant surprises happened. It was not that everything improved immediately. It was that her default narrative loosened. The phrase, "I must break it first," lost its grip as evidence arrived that some things did not need breaking. She did not abandon caution. She learned how to calibrate it rather than weaponize it. These stories point to a theme. The trap is not in being cautious. Caution is sensible. The trap is when caution becomes identity, when avoidance is morality, when defeat is defended as dignity. If you are listening and feel the muscles of recognition, do not recoil into shame. Notice, instead, where the habit thins. The thin places are your portals out. Maybe it is a single dinner where you choose curiosity over suspicion. Maybe it is a spreadsheet that lists wins alongside losses. Maybe it is a commitment to show up, small and imperfect, to one risky meeting this month. These are small acts of training. They will feel awkward because you are inside a new narrative. That awkwardness is progress. Before I close this section, I want to draw what all these subtypes have in common at the level that matters. They share an appetite for evidence that confirms a fixed identity. They draw lines and keep themselves inside them. They confuse the protection of a border with the condition of flourishing. And crucially, they mistake the universe for a prosecutor rather than a mirror. They expect judgment and therefore act as if judged. This expectation produces the very evidence of judgment. That is the cruelty of the loop. It is not mystical. It is mechanical. It is a social psychological feedback loop with measurable costs in money, relationships, and spiritual weight. So where do you go from here? Recognize your subtype. Own the ritual that keeps the pattern alive. Name the small action that would test an alternative. Do that thing, not as a leap of faith, but as a curious experiment. Change feels like being a scientist about your life. Collect data on new actions and new outcomes, not just old injuries. If you will do that, you will get to the part where the pattern loosens. And if you will not do that, you will have learned a hard and useful truth. Patterns survive because we feed them. The next section will show the invisible law that makes this loop so effective, and why the universe always seems to punish those who live inside it. Stay with me. There is a law hiding in plain sight inside these minds. I call it the law of selective negative interpretation. It is simple. It is ruthless. It explains why a gift looks like a trap. The law begins as a tiny habit of meaning. A person expects harm more than help. That expectation colors perception immediately. Neutral facts start to pile into a story of threat. The mind becomes a sieve that only keeps the dark grains. I have seen the law operate at breakfast tables and in boardrooms. A woman opens an email that says, "We'd like to offer you a role." She does not picture the work. She imagines the colleague who will cut her down. The contract becomes proof of entrapment. Her energy contracts around the imagined betrayal. The offer shrinks before she answers. You can map the law like this: stimulus, biased lens, narrowed perception, confirmatory interpretation, stored verdict. Each step nudges the next. The mechanism is mechanical, not mystical. It is a chain of micro-decisions that always points one way. Here is how it looks in the body. The same person who laughs at a compliment later wakes with a stomach knot. Praise triggers a tiny adrenaline spike. That spike asks the mind for a story to justify the alarm. The story arrives. They will find out I am a fraud. The body and the story collude. Somatic proof feels like evidence. The law also has a social gearbox. People who expect punishment choose witnesses who validate the expectation. They lean toward friends who relativize success. They join groups that valorize suffering. The environment does not conspire against them. It politely reflects back what they broadcast. The mind shapes the world shapes the mind. The loop tightens. Money amplifies the law because cash makes consequences visible. Dollars create options and therefore decision points. For someone living under this law, each choice is a test where failure must be prevented. So money is not an opportunity. It is a threat vector. They either lock it away or spend it to erase it. Both moves obey the same internal script. Consider a simple example. A man receives a modest bonus. His first thought is legal trouble. He imagines distant cousins surfacing to claim inheritance. He does not consult an advisor because advisors are strangers. He trusts his fear. He invests poorly or buries the money. Later, loss appears. He frames the loss as final confirmation. Money always ruins things for me. The law completed its cycle. The law is powered by attention. Negative outcomes are sticky. The brain rewards prediction. When you anticipate doom and doom follows, the brain celebrates accuracy. It produces dopamine for being right. That reinforcement is quiet and pernicious. You get paid to be pessimistic. There is also a metaphysical rumor that the law feeds, the idea that the universe has favorites. People who live by the law treat the universe like a judge. They look for sentences in ordinary events. A delayed message becomes condemnation. A canceled meeting is evidence of rejection. The belief animates interpretive choices. The world is read as indictment, not as raw data. This law will not leave obvious tracks. It dresses itself in moral language. I refuse to sell out sounds noble. I prefer integrity over greed reads well. But when those phrases are used to refuse worthwhile risk, they function as moral camouflage for avoidance. The law loves language that sanctifies limitation. You might hear me say something bluntly now. The law does not create bad luck. It creates coherent outcomes that fit the mind's forecast. If you treat money like a landmine, you will make choices that keep it contained or destroy it. That is not cosmic punishment. It is consequence. It is predictably efficient. If you are inside this law, you will also notice a peculiar economy of evidence. Each negative event is elevated. Each positive event is minimized, explained away, or explained forward into doom. A promotion becomes evidence of future overload. A compliment becomes a precursor to exposure. The ledger records insults and omissions with photographic fidelity while letting kindness fall into the cracks. The only reason the law appears magical is time. Repetition over years looks like destiny. Patterns create a narrative external to the person. They were always unlucky. But underneath that narrative is a set of repeated choices produced by repeated interpretations. The law is banal and exact. Understanding the law is not the same as escaping it. Knowledge alone is not corrective. The law is practiced in tiny habits, in how someone reads an email, accepts a call, or sets a price. My job, when I work with people caught in it, is to map the habit and then to make the repetition visible. Once the habit is visible, it stops feeling inevitable. Before I show the law in action how it becomes a lived cycle, I want you to notice one small thing about your reactions. Ask yourself quietly, when something good happens, what is my first story about it? If the first sentence begins with, but, you are rehearsing the law. Now watch the same loop in relationships. Someone meets a person who is kind and curious. The habitual interpreter asks, when will they leave? That question frames every generous gesture as temporary. The responder hyper-scrutinizes texts, times silences, inventories flaws. They preemptively create distance or tests. The partner grows exhausted. The relationship collapses. The collapse is filed as conclusive evidence. I am unlovable. The same loop runs in career choices. Opportunity arrives, and the inner voice edits the narrative. This will add stress, enemies, and exposure. So the person declines, under-applies, or accepts, but then quietly undermines the project. The result is stagnation. Stagnation is proof. Proof is comforting because it eliminates ambiguity. Comfort is a familiar trap. Observe how the mind uses memory as ammunition. The evidence collector is a case study. 10 wins are invisible. One slight is an archive. That slight is replayed like forensic footage. It becomes the centerpiece of future decisions. When a promotion is offered, the collector consults the file, not the facts. The file yields reasons to refuse scaling. Each cycle strengthens the next. Negative interpretation leads to avoidance. Avoidance produces small failures or missed gains. Those outcomes are read as confirmation. Confirmation reinforces the interpretive apparatus. The loop accelerates until the person cannot imagine any other way. There is an efficiency to this cruelty. It preserves identity. If you define yourself as someone who is wronged, you will find evidence to maintain that definition. Identity is the currency. The mind spends attention to keep the account balanced. Change seems like betrayal to the self because it threatens the coherence the identity provides. I see 3 behavioral strategies emerge from the cycle. 1 is shrinkage. People undervalue themselves and their work. They underprice gigs, avoid negotiations, and hide their success. Another is surveillance. They watch for signs of decay, invasions, and betrayal. Surveillance exhausts them and helps no one. The third is sabotage. By breaking the thing first, they control the terms of failure. Sabotage feels like mastery until the losses accumulate. There is a biochemical economy at work too. Chronic vigilance increases cortisol. Sleep fragments. Appetite shifts. The body becomes a reminder of the bargain the mind struck. Keep the narrative, and the body will be on alert. When good events occur, the parasympathetic system does not relax. The body expects punishment. It prepares for it. Somatic expectation colors experience and then becomes another piece of evidence. The cycle also exploits social scripts. People around the sufferer learn how to react. They either accommodate the caution or remove themselves. Many withdraw. The circle of safe witnesses shrinks. The sufferer then selects for friends who confirm the narrative. The social world becomes a mirror that amplifies the original belief. I once worked with a woman, call her M, who won a scholarship abroad. She did everything right and planned for catastrophe. She cataloged threats so meticulously that she never allowed joy. Networking opportunities passed because she feared attachment and later loss. She returned with a perfect transcript and an empty Rolodex. She read her apparent emptiness as confirmation. The world did not punish her. Her defenses prevented her from receiving the gift. Another client, D, inherited money and treated it like a lit fuse. He hoarded, mistrusted advisors, and eventually made rash solitary decisions. The money dwindled. He framed the loss as vindication. The narrative closed. Money always ruins me, he said. But this was not fate. It was a sequence of avoidant and fearful choices with predictable results. Those stories show another danger. The cycle is seductive. It offers an explanation that spares responsibility. It casts the world as the villain and the self as a martyr. Martyrdom preserves meaning. Meaning, even painful, is preferable to the terrifying openness of choice. If you are listening and squirming, good. That discomfort is information. It means the loop is recognizable. I want you to feel the moral texture of the pattern, not shame, but sober accountability. The loop is brilliant at protecting a fragile ego. It is less brilliant at producing livelihood, intimacy, or a life you actually want. Now notice what keeps the loop invisible. Two things: selective memory and language of virtue. The mind rehearses past injuries. It cultivates phrases like, "I won't compromise my integrity." Those phrases legitimize avoidance. They make stagnation feel like righteousness. The person lives small and calls it noble. They believe themselves ethically superior to the sellouts. This rhetoric is a thermostat for the loop. Breaking the cycle requires interruption, not argument. You cannot reason someone out of a habit they learned to protect themselves. You have to change the relational patterns that feed the habit. You need small behavioral experiments that contradict the prediction. You need evidence of a different story. This is where the next part begins. The loop will continue until a rupture occurs. That rupture can be catastrophic or catalytic. It can break someone, or it can wake them. The difference between collapse and awakening is the subject of the next section. There is a moment where repetition stops being tolerable. People arrive there by different routes. I will describe that break point and the choices it forces. You will see the moment when the loop either eats the life or becomes the doorway out. The accumulation reaches a pressure point. At first it is slow. Missed opportunities look like isolated regrets. But then a season arrives when losses align. A job that might have led to a career evaporates. A relationship ends after a fight that was manufactured by fear. A savings account depletes through panicked choices. The pattern is no longer bearable. This is the breakpoint. When I say breakpoint, I mean the felt moment when the person either collapses inward or snaps toward clarity. Collapse looks like despair. It can be an anxiety attack, a financial emergency, or a final lonely Thanksgiving. Awakening looks like a hard equation solved. I have been doing this to myself. Both are painful. One leads deeper into the loop. The other can be a hinge. I watched a client at his breakpoint. He had a career he could have scaled. Instead, he spent a decade arguing moral cases for scarcity. At 42, he realized the cost. He had no savings, no partner, and a stack of unstarted projects. He felt raw humiliation, then a small, strange relief. The relief was not joy. It was the clearing that follows being tired of holding the same story. That clearing is where decision becomes possible. The breakpoint usually begins with a concrete shock. An audit, a breakup, a stolen identity. But more often it is the quiet accumulation becoming unbearable. People notice their energy haunts their body. They are always tired. They measure time by small losses instead of gains. The world stops being a set of options and becomes a list of threats. This turning point creates a simple bifurcation. Option 1. Continue to blame external forces and ritualize caution until resources and relationships are exhausted. Option 2. Admit that an interpretation pattern is directing behavior and begin the work of reprogramming. The admission is not a one-time confession. It is an ongoing decision to observe before reacting. Admitting the pattern often triggers grief. People mourn the years they defended scarcity as dignity. They mourn the incomes never earned, the friendships never deepened, the markets never entered. That grief is legitimate and necessary. It clears attachment to identity built around being wronged. After grief, there is space to experiment. The first experiments are clumsy. They look like tiny betrayals of the old script. A person accepts a small freelance job without negotiating every clause. They go to a dinner without testing the partner. They open a bank account and consult an advisor. These moves feel dangerous. They also begin to produce contradictory evidence. The advisor helps. The dinner is pleasant. The project delivers small income. The brain receives new data. But the breakpoint also reveals how entrenched defenses can be. Old habits reassert themselves the moment fear peaks. The saboteur will test kindness to confirm it is fragile. The collector will revisit dossiers. The comparator will immediately remeasure other people's outcomes. Slips happen. Relapses are part of the process. What follows the breakpoint is work graded, deliberate, patient work. It is not an overnight identity makeover. It is a set of repeated small experiments that produce new evidence. Those experiments are the subject of what comes next. They include a new interpretive stance, tiny rituals to interrupt automatic meanings, and concrete financial behaviors that create different outcomes. If you are listening and recognize the sensation of the breakpoint exhaustion, repeating stories, hollow rituals know this. Collapse and awakening are both plausible futures. The difference rests on one thing: whether you will accept responsibility enough to test small alternatives. That testing is scary because it demands vulnerability. Vulnerability is the currency of growth here. In the next section, I will give the first practical pattern to try. It is simple and stubborn. It creates a gap between event and interpretation. It is a discipline you can practice immediately. It will feel awkward and potentially humiliating. That is good. Humiliation is often the price of dismantling a protective narrative. If you are ready to risk small shame for a different life, stay with me. Madanka kamika reconhecimento seco isem glamour. Neo a assort que precisa mudar. Ao filtro que você usa para lur assort. Eu digo isso porque six pessoas fazerem acertos notáveis eos lermos como provas de que o mundo quer punir-los. Esse movimento mental é antigo. Ele tem memória, rotina e defesa. A primeira tarefa é deslocar a posição de quem interpreta. Eu chamo esse deslocamento de testemunha neutra. É simples de nomear. É difícil de praticar. Ser testemunha neutra neo é ser otimista automático. Neo é forcar sorriso diante do desastre. É, literalmente, criar espaço entre o evento e sua história sobre o evento. O que muita gente dizer. Eu sou vejo o que acontece comigo. Eu respondo, ok. Aprenda a ver o que acontece antes de contar a história. Essa pausa de 2 a 8 segundos é a alavanca. Nesses segundos você pode escolher olhar dados neo-narrativos. Você pode perguntar, com curiosidade e sem pena, o que realmente está ocorrendo. Para transformar essa possibilidade em hábito, proponho ritual de prática. Eu chamo de desafio das 4 perguntas. É exercício de 21 dias porque os circuitos cerebrais respondem a repetição. Toda vez que algo relevante ocorre uma proposta, elogio, traço, conflito você para. Respira 2 vezes. E responde, por escrito ou mentalmente, a 4 perguntas. 1. O que estou assumindo sobre isso que pode não ser verdade? 2. Se uma pessoa mais curiosa vivesse isso, como ela interpretaria? 3. Que oportunidade prática pode estar escondida aqui? 4. M5 anos. Qual parte disso realmente importa? Anote. Poucas linhas batem. O importante neo é acertar a resposta positiva. É exercitar a disrupção do piloto automático. Se você fizer isso 10 vezes por dia por 3 semanas, sua mente comica a oferecer a pausa espontaneamente. Isso é o objetivo. Transformar a pausa em reflexo. Agora, como isso mexe com dinheiro, com oportunidades, com relacionamentos? Você direito. Quando alguém que sempre viajar recebe uma oferta de trabalho, o padrão antigo já tem roteiro. Mais trabalho, menos vida, veo me demitir. A testemunha neutra pergunta, o que exatamente implica essa oferta em termos de horas, equipe, aprendizado, ganho daqui a mano? Ela anota os fatos. Ela negocia com dados, neo com medo. Isso muda decisões. Muda contas. Muda relações profissionais. Muda saldo bancário. O ritual tem variacos práticas. Se o evento é financeiro, acrescent uma ação concreta no mesmo dia. abrir uma planilha simples, marcar 30 minutos com consultor, reservar 10% do valor recebido para experimentos. Se encontro amoroso, reserve uma nota em voz alta. Vou observar sem testar. Se aplaço, responda com agradecimento e curto registro. Ok, isso me permite tentar daqui a 6 meses. Pequenos movimentos físicos criam diferenças internas. EUPECO as pessoas que testem dois parâmetros, tempo e evidência. Tempo. Mantenha o desafio das 4 perguntas por 21 dias seguidos. Evidência. Mantenha caderno com 3 colunas evento, resposta às perguntas, resultado nas próximas semanas. Depois de 21 dias compare. Raramente as vidas não mostram alguma divergência. Pequenos ganhos aparecem. Pequenas decisões que antes foram evitadas, como acontecer. A prática expô algo incômodo. O velho filtro tenta reagir como firewall. Ele vai gerar desconforto, vergonha, raiva, alívio falso. Isso é normal. Eu aconselho duas estratégias nesse ponto. Primeiro, registre o desconforto em palavras. Neo esse dialogue com ele. Nome. Segundo, pre-planeje respostinhas mecânicas para as guerras do filtro. Exemplo, quando surgir o pensamento, isso vai dar errado. Diga a esse mesmo. Obrigado, já ouvi você. Vou verificar os fatos. Dizer voz baixa desloca a carga emocional. Outra ferramenta complementar é o microexperimento. A mudança de crenca neo vira por pensamento só. Ela vira por acaio. Escala risco pequeno que o velho eu evitaria. Aceit contrato curto sem sufocar com cláusulas. Marcam café sem testar o parceiro. Invista 5% do dinheiro extra numa idea que você normalmente descartaria. O objetivo é produzir contra-evidência. O universo neo decide. Suas acos comandam probabilidades. A cereja é que essas experiências, mesmo quando falam, geram dados diferentes dos que sua história esperava. O ritual também precisa de limites éticos. Neo se trata de abandonar prudência. Trata-se de questionar narrativas que travam oportunidades. Você neo deixa de fazer due diligence. Você muda o ordem. Observar antes de contar a tragédia. Eu costumeiramente digo ao cliente. Se for para perder dinheiro, pelo menos que você perca experimentando com método, neo por paralisia. Pratica sem test social costume falhar. Por isso recomendo olhado observador. Pode ser amigo firme, parceiro, mentor. Diga a essa pessoa. Vou praticar essa pausa por 21 dias. Se eu escorregar, me lembro de perguntar as 4 perguntas antes de agir. Alianças sociais reformulam reputacos. Elas tornam mais difícil retornar ao velho papel de martir. E encurtam o tempo de prática. Haverá recaídas. Isso não é falha moral, é informação. Quando você volta ao comportamento antigo, anote com neutralidade. Quando, qual gatilho, qual sensação. Use esses registros para ajustar a intervenção. Às vezes o gatilho é corporal, fome, fadiga, sono. Às vezes é social. Uma pessoa que sempre reforça o sofrimento. Se for social, ajuste seu ambiente. Se for somático, trate o corpo. Existe uma dimensão narrativa que muitos evitam. A identidade. O filtro protege eu, que ganho sentido na narrativa de injustiça. Quando eu proponho diminuir esse filtro, muitas pessoas sentem que estou treinando uma versão digna de si mesmas. Por isso o ritual inclui trabalho de escrita curta. O que eu ganho mantendo o papel de azarado. List 3 benefícios imediatos. Normalmente aparecem justificativa, atenção, icing ko de responsabilidade. Reconhecer esses ganhos redas a tirania deles. Você não precisa negar o passado para experimentar outro futuro. Na primeira rede de ex-alunos que frequenta após o retorno, ela resistiu a tentação de testar as pessoas com perguntas armadas. Em vez disso, fez perguntas abertas e anotou nomes e interesses. 2 meses depois, desses contatos indicou para projeto que exigia exatamente sua especialidade. O projeto lhe deu mais credenciais e, o mais crucial, o primeiro escolhido de sua rede profissional. Foi efeito multiplicador de microaberturas. Permita que eu seja específico sobre tempo. Na prática, os resultados se desenrolam em camadas temporais. Nos primeiros dias, você vê mudança interna. Menos catastrofismo, mais curiosidade. Nas primeiras semanas, pequenos riscos como acontecer. Em 2 a 3 meses, oportunidades como alanhar se emprego, cliente, convite valioso. Em 6 a 2 meses, acumuleo dessas escalas muda o mapa de possibilidades. Neo é mágica. É efeito composto. Esses resultados aparecem em frentes diferentes. Financeira, pessoas como a gastar de forma mais estratégica. Em vez de enterrar o extra na peixe de quem espera punicao, elas testam investimentos pequenos. Conversam com consultor e criam bolsos de experimentos. Profissional, passam de estanhaco para projetos que elevam percepcos de valor. Relational, dixam de transformar vulnerabilidade em test hostil. Espiritualmente, a conversa com o universo muda de ele mio dia para o que está sendo oferecido que eu ainda não six? Mas não pense que o progresso é linear. O velho filtro ataca com força. Haverá episódios em que parece que nada mudou. Cliente volta a arquivar provas antigas para justificar recuo. Nesses momentos, o que importa é a resposta ao recuo. Se a pessoa se envergonha e se tranca, o velho padrão ganha força. Se ela observa a recaída com curiosidade e anota as condicos, isso vira dado para ajustar o experimento. A repetição é o grau de treino que transforma a recaída em informação. Quero que você imagine uma cena concreta de 6 meses. Você continua o desafio das 4 perguntas. Dia recebe uma oferta ambígua. Em vez de negar o perigo, você reúne fatos. Em 3 semanas, você entrega algo que surpreende porque não foi feito com medo. Foi feito com estratégia. O resultado imediato pode ser modesto. Mas acontecem 2 coisas. Primeiro, você cria evidência contrária ao seu script antigo. Segundo, as pessoas ao redor o vêm executando com método. Isso altera reputacos. Reputacos alteram oportunidades. A dimensão social aqui que não dá para subestimar. Quando amigos ou familiar surpreendem que você não vai mais se transformar em vítima cronicamente, eles rigam. Alguns apoiam. Outros resistem. Isso é esperado. Pessoas que lucravam com sua narrativa de sofrimento podem recuar. Prepare-se para perdas sociais e para ganhos sociais. Você pode perder amigo que gostava de livre sofrer. Você pode ganhar aliados que desejam ver você prosperar. Ambos são parte do movimento. Praticar a testemunha neutra também muda a maneira como você lida com o erro. O velho padrão converte erros em absolvico da identidade. Eu sabia que não deve certo. O novo padrão registra. Erro equals dado. Ele pede ajuste. Essa mudança reduz vergonha e aumenta aprendizagem. Cliente passou a documentar decisões mal sucedidas com 2 campos, hipótese e lição. Isso transforma fiascos em manual pessoal de otimização. Depois de ano, ele tinha mapa claro do que funcionava e do que não funcionava. Permita-me trazer caso de perda que vira ganho. D. Que herdara dinheiro e gasta anos se apagando ao medo. Decidi testar o ritual a contragasto. Em vez de esconder o capital, ele procuro consultor e abriu conta separada para investimentos experimentais. Oito meses have perda uma aposta arriscada. No entanto, o trabalho com o consultor gerou outro movimento. Realocação de recursos e plano de negócios que, em 2 anos, recupero e ultrapasso o capital original. O que por isso confirma que o do azar vira informação valiosa quando documentado e analisado. Quero ser claro. Os ganhos não são externos. A liberdade interna de neo lercada presente como armadilha e, por isso, uma muda. Pessoas que praticam a pausa relatam sono melhor, menos tensão no corpo e menos reatividade. Isso lhes dá espaço para escolher melhor. O corpo forma memória. O cerebro forma habito. Juntos alteram destino. Ainda assim, existe uma fragilidade. Obsesso por evidência rápida. Muitos esperam resultados instantâneos e interrompem o método cedo. Eu sempre digo, atitude é acumular provas, não procurar provas imediatas. Se você quer realmente transformar, pensem 12 meses como horizonte mínimo para ver diferença substantial. E há outra coisa que quase ninguém menciona, a alegria inesperada. Quando você interrompe o velho script, comica a experimentar situações pelo que são, não pelo que representam para sua história de sofrimento. Uma conversa ganha sabor. Perdido ganha curiosidade. Isso não pega bolidos instantaneamente, mas altera o clima das decisões. E o clima altera escalas. Então, o futuro alternativo que descrevo não é blá blá motivational. É mapa com passos pequenos e repetidos que produzem, ao longo do tempo, terreno completamente diferente. Mas antes de você imaginar que é uma caminhada isolada, saiba, a próxima etapa é a que garante que essas mudanças se tornem sustentáveis. No próximo bloco eu vou falar do que vem depois da primeira mudança como segurar novos hábitos, estruturar rotinas para que provas continuam a aparecer, e transformar as novas interpretações em infraestrutura financeira, emotional e social. Se você quer que o novo padrão vir casa e não visita, precisa ouvir o fechamento que vem a seguir. Tudo o que eu disse aqui converge para uma ideia simples. O problema não é que o universo escala você. É que você escolhe sua lente. Essa escala cria fluxo de decisões que gera os resultados que hoje você chama de azar. Quando você muda a lente, muda o fluxo. Isso é responsabilidade, não culpa. É poder, não promessa vazia. Agora eu vou te devolver o espelho. Respire e responda com brutal honestidade. Onde você está? Negando que haja padrão? No centro do ciclo, redando a mesma história? Já testando a pausa, com recaídas? Ou praticando com disciplina? Não é uma pergunta retórica. É o ponto do aqueo. Sua resposta determina o próximo gesto. Antes de dormir hoje, faça gesto mínimo que eu pelo a todos os meus clientes. Escala uma situação recente que você chama de azar típico. Abra seu caderno. Aplique as 4 perguntas. Escreva 3 linhas sobre uma aqueo de 24 horas que contradiga sua hipótese automática. Tome essa aqueo. No dia seguinte, registre o que aconteceu. Faça isso por 3 dias seguidos. Se você fizer, terá iniciado o mecanismo de evidência. Isso muda tudo. Para transformar isso em hábito durável. Proponho conjunto de práticas que cabem qualquer agenda. Primero, o registro diario. 2 minutos ao fim do dia. O que aconteceu? Qual gatilho ativo a historia antiga? O que e uma última coisa prática, curta e direta. Se você quiser continuar esse diálogo, escreva nos comentários sua cidade/país e a primeira que você tomou. Se chegar aqui, inscreva-se para não perder os próximos episódios onde eu destrinco outros padrões e práticas. Obrigado por ouvir. Neo espero por milagre. Espero por metodo. E enteo sea paciente com o metodo. Chamada curta. Obrigado por ficar ofim. Se este video mexe com algo, escreva sua cidade/país e a pequena que você fará hoje. Inscreva-se para acompanhar os próximos episódios.